Welcome to tonight's video on domain and range. We're going to talk about equations that begin with x equals instead of y equals. Now the process is still the same. The only difference is that now what you did for the domain is actually the range and vice versa. So if I ask you to find the domain and range of x equals 4y minus 3 over y minus 1, to find the range, you're basically going to just set y minus 1 equal to 0, and that gives you the restriction. So the range is from negative infinity to 1, union 1 to infinity. Now for the domain, remember here we used to find the inverse. We used to find the inverse where we'd swap the x's and y's, and then we'd solve. So here we'd solve for x. So I'd multiply by x minus 1. So I'd get xy minus y equals 4x minus 3. Then I move all the x's to one side. So I'd get xy minus 4x equals y minus 3 when I move everything over. Then I factor out the x, so I get y minus 4 equals y minus 3. Then I divide, and notice I would get x equals y minus 3 over y minus 4. So this would be the inverse, so I know y cannot equal 4. So that means the domain would be from negative infinity to 4 and 4 to infinity. So that's the process that we used before. There is a shortcut that I will tell you now that we've done this. And the shortcut is to look at the coefficients in front of the y terms, the 4 and the 1, and divide them. Notice 4 over 1 gives you 4, and that is what the range will be. Alright, so if you notice, these two terms, the y does not equal 4 here, matches with the y does not equal 4 there. So instead of finding the inverse, all you have to do is divide the coefficients in front, and that'll give you the restriction for that domain. Alright, when we're talking about a radical function, remember now the range is going to be under the rad, so we make 5 minus 4y greater than or equal to 0. And then when we divide by the negative, remember we have to flip the rad. So y is less than or equal to 5/4. That is our range. And then our domain, we're going to replace the rad with greater than or equal to 0. So when we multiply 3 times 0, we get 0. 3 times infinity, we get infinity. Then 2 minus 0 is 2. 2 minus infinity is negative infinity. And then remember, the smaller term needs to come first. And there's our domain. Because remember, we're doing the opposite now because it's x equals. So the way we found the range before is now the way we find the domain and vice versa. Finding the domain of a squared. Remember now, since the domain was all real numbers when it was y equals, now the range is going to be all real numbers when x is equals. And then to find the domain, we replace the squared with greater than or equal to 0. So we go 2 minus 3 times greater than or equal to 0. Distribute the 3, and you get 0 to infinity. And then 2 minus gives you 2 to negative infinity. and negative infinity to 2. Like that. So that is your domain. All right, so let's do some examples. Pause the video and see if you can do these on your own, and then check your answers with me. All right, so look at the first one is a fraction. So the range, remember you have to make 2y minus 5 cannot equal 0. So y cannot equal 5 halves. So that is your range from negative infinity to 5 halves. To find the domain, remember, look at the coefficients in front of the y. It's 3 halves, so that's going to be your domain. So it's from negative infinity to 3 halves, union 3 halves to infinity. So instead of finding the inverse, all you got to do is look at the coefficients in front of the y, and that tells you what x cannot be. For number 2, all right, looking at number 2, remember inside the radical, this is y equals, so the domain is going to be what's inside the radical, greater than or equal to 0. So we get 8x is greater than or equal to negative 5. X is greater than or... All right, so the domain is from negative 5/8 to infinity. Now for the range, this is where we'll make this, we'll replace it with greater than or equal to 0. 7 minus 0 comma infinity, and then so it becomes 7 to negative infinity, which means it's negative infinity to 7 less than. So the domain in this case is greater than or equal to negative 5/8. The range is less than or equal to 7. So depending upon y equals or x equals, that's how you're going to attack it. Now number 5, this is a line. So the domain and range are both going to be negative infinity to infinity. Number 3 here, we have x equals, so that means the range is going to be all real numbers, because normally if it was y equals, the domain would be all real numbers and an absolute value. And the domain, we're going to put the greater than or equal to 0 in for the absolute value. So 6 times 0 is 0. 6 times infinity is infinity. And then when you add 9, it's going to go greater than or equal to 9 for the domain. For number 4, it's a y equals, so that means the domain is all real numbers. And then the range, we're going to put the greater than or equal to 0 in. So 5 times 0 is 0, 5 times infinity is infinity, minus 7, so 0 minus 7 is negative 7. Infinity minus 7 is still infinity, so it's greater than or equal to negative 7. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed the video tonight and understand that it's just, you have to look and see if it's x equals or y equals to understand the rules for domain and range as far as which one to do first. If it's x equals, then you do the range first and then the domain second. If it's y equals, do the domain first and the range second. All right, have a good evening and have a good Halloween and be safe.